So the Star Wars original trilogy is not the only place where George Lucas kind of dabbled his hands in changing things around, and with a lot of people celebrating the 25th anniversary of the start of the prequel trilogy, I figured what the hell, let's go ahead and look at all the different revisions that George Lucas made to Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. So May 19th, 1999, so the release of the beginning of the Star Wars Prequel Trilogy, which George Lucas has been teasing for a number of years at that point in time, but he was waiting for filmmaking tools and digital technology to get to the point where they actually realized everything he envisioned for the entire story. And this was so just ravenous. Just like everything on the internet was such a wild west with people just rumors and speculation and leaks, all this type of stuff just running wild all over the place. And so much so that in the early days of the internet here, we don't really have YouTube or any place you could really watch trailers so much online. People actually went to certain film screenings to pay entry to certain films just to see the trailers for The Phantom Menace and then walk out. And then the whole thing, when tickets went on sale, lines are on the block. I actually sat in an afternoon outside of a theater getting sunburnt with a brand new Discman waiting to buy tickets for opening night. So it was just insane. It was just a crazy time to be a Star Wars fan. And then the film eventually got released. And the fact was, still to this day, from the point it was released up to now, it's still a very divisive film. How people kind of took it, how people kind of grew up with it, kind of went on over the years, maybe critical reappraisals to the positives and negatives, all these different things. Like, I very much was caught up in hype and the wave of everything like that. I was like caught up in so much like, it's just Star Wars. I love Star Wars. I just kept going back to see the thing. I watched all the 3 films in theaters and stuff like that. And I was very much a fan of it to a certain point in time where kind of my critical analysis got shifted to a certain degree. And I was analyzing films a lot more and just like found a lot of flaws throughout the films. But I do acknowledge that there are a lot of people who do like the films for various reasons. In terms of how the film kind of went along, and George kind of made some changes here and there points of time. Went from different formats and different releases, stuff like that. Things got a little bit tweaked here and there. Not as much as what we did with the original trilogy in the special editions that I covered in another video, but interesting type of things here and there. Because as you get into the Phantom Menace, the one main thing that was done from preview screenings for critics up until the original proper release, the whole thing, the wide release, the one thing was changed was the fact that when Darth Maul gets killed by Obi-Wan Kenobi and falls down the shaft originally, he wasn't split in 2. He just kind of gets slashed and he falls down, and that effect was not present. When they got to the final release version of it, that effect was actually added in to those prints. Now, when you move on from theatrical into home video, it's a very interesting thing because George kind of stayed off the DVD release at first because he felt like there was a little more mileage that the kind of format needed to get up on before he really wanted to commit to releasing films on the format there. So he kind of staved it off because we only got VHS and then we got Laserdisc, but only in Japan, widescreen Laserdisc, and this was the theatrical version of the film. Now, I got the widescreen VHS set, beautiful type of thing, has an excerpt from The Art of the Phantom Menace, has a nice film still, and all these little nice things, like a really nice box here to really have. Even though, like, I've fallen out for being kind of a fan of the films, like, it's still a very nice collector's piece to hold on to and stuff like that. And I do think the production design in the entire film largely is very, very good. So having a little piece of that art book is a nice little thing to have. Now, I do believe there were video CDs produced of The Phantom Menace over in Asian markets, but I'm not entirely certain exactly which version of the film it was, depending on what the release date was, which master was used, whether it was the theatrical cut master from the Laserdisc or later on the DVD version, which we're about to get into. And the DVD was released in 2001, so a little bit of a stretch there from the original home video release on Laserdisc and VHS. And so when you got up to the DVD, which was anamorphically enhanced, very good quality in that thing, whole 5.1 EX surround sound, which I found, someone said that the 5.1 track on the Laserdisc is very, very good. So I don't know how it quite compares to the one on the DVD, but there are a couple of changes made to the entire thing. And they're mainly in the pod race sequence, more or less in the middle of the film there. And George decided to add in some extended footage here. There's some things extended with Sebulba, again, his introduction to the entire thing. And various other things where I have Shmi Skywalker and Anakin Skywalker having a little bit of an extra conversation there before the race, just saying,
"Be safe. I will, Mom. I promise.
And there's some extra introductions to the other racers, the entire thing, and just the main thing is the second lap of the entire pod race actually gets extended. There's a couple extra minutes. There's some extra little things here, like when part of the cable gets loose from Anakin's pod and kind of flying around. There's a little thing that he kind of grabs as a magnetic sort of pole, and he kind of pulls it back in to reconnect and whatnot. And there's a few other little antics going on here and there that just kind of draws it out to a certain degree. I don't find it's like it helps with anything with, typically with storytelling or anything like that. Just kind of an extra, almost frivolous type of thing, just to have something that he further envisioned for, they kind of cut down for theatrical. We kind of felt like putting it back in for this release. But beyond that, the other thing changed for the DVD release. The fact that when everyone gets the chorus on the landing pad there's additional footage where the scene extends off to a different degree, where you have like Anakin and Padme and Jar Jar all going off to this air taxi and flies off to another building in Coruscant, where in the theatrical cut it kind of ends where Qui-gon Jinn's talking with Chancellor Valorum, and they wipe cut to establish a shot of another building, and you move into the next scene. So just kind of a slight alteration and whatnot, and that establishing shot never appears again in any subsequent version of the film that's been released. Now, when we got to the Blu-ray release in 2011, there's a lot more tweaks done, a lot more effects changes, a lot of things here and there. The DVD did have this weird peak issue. The color grading was a little bit off to a certain degree, even compared to the VHS version. Still kind of looked a little bit weird. I always noticed this type of thing. And when they went out to the Blu-ray, they kind of did some color grading adjustments and whatnot to make it look a little bit more standard or whatnot, look a little more natural. And so it just has a better color palette all over the place. And they kind of expanded the image area for the entire film, where you kind of compare the two different versions, the two different masters. Definitely is showing a lot more image area overall for the 2.35 to 1 frame. And so, moving on from that, they actually redid the opening crawl to kind of adjust the sort of tilt or angle of it to kind of match the other two prequels. So just a slight bit of an adjustment there in that regard. But moving on from there, we have Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon on the Trade Federation ship and being attacked by the droid cars. They actually alter the kind of force speed effect when they're running away, kind of a little bit adjusted in that regard. Also, when you got Viceroy Newt Gunray and everyone else on the bridge kind of looking at the security footage of the Jedis, they kind of expanded this entire holographic view screen and whatnot to make it a bigger graphic overall, and just adjusted things a little bit here and there in different shots in that regard. Now, the next thing is actually in the pod race sequence with the two-headed announcer, where there's actually an animation error here. For like a couple of frames, it's the point where his hand kind of passes across his chest, where the vest kind of pops out in front of it, where it's supposed to stay behind it. And so in the Blu-ray version, they actually corrected that, but before, it kind of just got it a little bit wonky in that regard. And the next couple of things are just kind of audio changes. A few things where after Queen Amidala puts forth the vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum in the Galactic Senate, there's actually points where people are shouting out like vote now, where it gets kind of switched around and kind of buried in the mix later on the Blu-ray release. And later on, when everyone's kind of going back to Naboo and boarding the ship, there's another thing where Anakin says, "Come on, R2." And originally, R2 just had a couple bleeps and stuff like that to kind of acknowledge that, where in this version, they cut that out for some reason whatsoever. So, interesting thing in that regard. But the bigger type of thing with the Phantom Menace is the fact of Yoda here. Because as we know, later on in the entire prequel trilogy, they went to a digital version of Yoda. Well, in Phantom Menace, originally, they did this puppet version of him, where they're kind of trying to make like a younger version of Yoda, despite the fact like he's 900 years old. Minusing 20 or so years probably shouldn't make that big of a difference. And so they had some back and forth and criticism about stuff like that, how good the puppet looked, how much I really think the execution of it kind of worked overall. And so, as they had one digital shot of Yoda at the end of the film originally, where he's kind of walking back and forth in the room, eventually on this version, they just decided to fully replace the puppet with a digital version of Yoda, which some people are back and forth on still. Some people want the original version preserved, some people don't mind the digital version. Just kind of back and forth about what you prefer, what would you like about it. You like the perfect preservation, you like a little bit more consistency across the entire trilogy there. Depends on everyone's kind of disposition on that whole thing. What they went through in every single scene and replaced them and stuff like that. Didn't change anything with the voice of Frank Oz, but still just replaced everything in every single shot. So me actually watching it for the first time, the Blu-ray version, took a little adjusting to get to, because I'm just kind of used to seeing the image of that puppet from like the trailers and previously watching the film on DVD and VHS, stuff like that. So interesting thing on that regard, but that's about all there is for the Phantom Menace. There are things in the 4K 3D release that was not all that much of a change in that regard, just minor things that are not really much to comment on. And so maybe some things in like different remixes like the Atmos track or something else like that might jump out at you to certain minor degrees or whatnot, but there's nothing really particular in that regard. And we're just looking at this stuff, it's nothing that really changes the narrative anywhere. Not really changes anything that's kind of egregious in some places here. Some people might have more of a contention about the digital Yoda in certain places, but it's nothing that has really turned up an uproar like some things that were done with the original trilogy and the special edition, stuff like that. And there's certain things I will cover with a certain version of the Attack of the Clones. They got a very interesting IMAX release, got a lot of things chopped out of it, that made a very different film to a certain degree, how it moved, how it kind of was constructed, because back in that day, IMAX only had a 2-hour runtime, and the film ran about 2 hours and 20 minutes, so we'll cover that in another video. Revenge of the Sith really didn't have anything other than one sort of transition change, and there's basically nothing else that was changed, so there's not really a video to make for that. So hopefully you guys found this a little bit interesting to kind of see what versions landed on which formats and stuff like that, and see which ones you want to seek out to find what you want to find. And actually the original theatrical version of the pod race sequence is actually included on the 4K edition as a separate bonus feature, so if you want to get the 4K and see the different versions in that regard, that is very much the best way to go about it, aside from getting the old analog video versions, which I felt was sufficient enough for the retro video series, where we feature a lot of analog video sources here. And so pretty much like to hear what you guys think about things. Like I said, Phantom Menace, the entire prequel trilogy, has a lot of divisive things to say about it. I had some blog posts, written reviews way back in the day, where I deconstructed these things at a very ad nauseum length. So it was a little more snippy than I would kind of approach it today. But those are available out there on the old Forever Cinematic blog on WordPress, if you're interested in checking those things out. But thanks so much, guys, for checking out this video. If you have any comments, lay them down below. Try to be civil and stuff like that. Don't get snippy with people like I did in my reviews. But anything like that, guys, so definitely appreciate you supporting things around here, watching everything, liking, subscribing, sharing things around, and all the type of stuff. There's always the Patreon to contribute something every month to get a little early access. Also, the Super Things feature to contribute anything directly through YouTube, which you very much appreciate in that regard. So, thanks so much, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.